What's up guys, I'm BTC. With the expected Overwatch 2 expansion, it seems very likely that there will be talents in a PvE cooperative mode, but could they also get talents to work in PvP? Right away, I'm sure some of you are saying, no way, it's not gonna happen, it's way too strong. And I would agree with you if they simply use the campaign story mode PvE talents, because those talents are made specifically to increase the strength of your character versus computer-controlled enemies. So it makes sense that they're going to make your character much stronger than it probably should be. And that's fine, because again, you're going against computer-controlled enemies, and it's more fun that way. But I do think there is a way that they can have a talent system that would work in Overwatch PvP, and I think it would make the game more balanced than it already is. I talked about this very briefly yesterday, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth on it today. Now, before I get started, if you enjoy the content here, make sure to like and share the video, because YouTube has changed how their system works, and it now greatly favors big name brand channels and celebrities over individual creators like me. So sharing the video helps a lot. I would appreciate it, and your other favorite YouTubers would appreciate it as well. Let's get into it. Overwatch is kind of in a middle ground between being a standard FPS and a MOBA like Dota 2 or League of Legends. It's a hero-based FPS, which means that there are some elements from both areas. This is why I often compare Overwatch to Dota 2 in a lot of ways, specifically when it comes to hero balancing. One of the things that many people misunderstand about game balance is that they think having more characters makes it more difficult to balance the game, and that's just simply not true. In fact, it's the opposite. When you have a wide variety of characters, it means that you have a huge amount of possible combinations between those characters. Adding even one new hero increases the overall complexity of the game because it adds an entirely new level of strategy where all of those other pre-existing characters can now combo possibly with that new one. Characters like Brigitte and Sigma completely changed how the game was played, for good or for bad. Character reworks like Mercy and Hanzo also completely changed how the game was played. But then you have others like Torbjorn's rework and also new characters like Ashe and Hammond, which had very little impact on the game overall. So it's not a guarantee that adding new stuff is going to change things up, but there's still a very good chance that it will. One of the problems with Overwatch and hero balance is that there simply isn't enough characters in the roster. This means that just a few combinations are possible, and because of this, it is very, very easy for one of those combinations to be far better than the others. This is why the meta for Overwatch has always consisted of 5 to 7 characters that are used by both teams in a mirror match. There really hasn't been a single time when multiple comps were viable, and you could switch in between them depending on the situation. There was always that one specific comp that tended to be the best, whether it was Dive or Goats or the current Double Barrier. The lack of possible combinations hinders a lot of the potential creativity and a lot of the new synergies that could be created from it. Alright, so now you might be asking, what does any of that have to do with talents? Well, talents are an easy way for Blizzard to add multiple layers of complexity and strategy for far less effort than creating entirely new characters. Now, I'm not going to say that they don't need to make new characters, they definitely do, but a talent system would be the equivalent of adding a dozen or so new characters all at once. And as I mentioned, the talents that were likely going to go into the campaign mode are designed to make your character inherently stronger as you go through the story and campaign, and that's fine for the PvE, but for the PvP, that is not a good idea at all. So, for PvP, the talent system would have to offer not flat upgrades to your current abilities, but instead it would have to offer side grades that wouldn't necessarily make your character stronger, but would instead put more emphasis on specific aspects or specific strategies of play. Once more, going back to the Dota 2 example, a while back they introduced a talent system, and as you're playing through the game, when you level up, not only do you have to pick the abilities that you want to use and increase in their strength. But at certain levels, you would also get to put points into a talent tree. Now, these options did pretty different things, and you could choose what you wanted to have depending on what was going on in that specific match. In some cases, you might want extra health. In other cases, you might want a faster attack speed. Obviously, the Dota situation is a little bit different because you play through a very long game, you have to gain experience, you level up over the course of the match. With Overwatch, it would necessarily have to be something different. So how would it work? Well, possibly every character could have 2 or maybe even 3 talents. Again, these don't specifically upgrade the character, but instead put more emphasis in one area or the other. Let me give you an example. Orisa could have 3 talents that are related to her halt ability. The first one is a neutral talent that just keeps everything as it currently is. You could just refer to it as the balance talent, right? The next one could make the halt ability area effect a little bit larger so that it can grab more enemies and pull them in, but it would also increase the cooldown of the ability by 1 or 2 extra seconds. So yeah, it grabs a larger area, but you can't use it as often. And then a third talent could cut the cooldown for halt in half, but make it so that it only able to pull 1 enemy at a time instead of all of them that are in the area. Now, neither of these 2 extra talents necessarily make Orisa stronger, but what they do is put her into a more specialized position depending on what your current match is and who you're working with. So if your other tank is Roadhog, then having the talent that lowers the cooldown but only grabs 1 person is probably going to be the best one, because that's going to help with that halt and hook combo. However, if you're working with Sigma, then perhaps the larger area effect one is going to be better, because then it can pull everybody together and it helps with his damage and his ultimate. Same thing goes with other characters like Hanzo or Junkrat or Pharah or whoever, right? So depending on what your situation is, one may be better than the other, but they're not necessarily stronger in a general sense. These are just some basic examples that I threw out off the top of my head. It took me just a couple minutes to think of these. I am absolutely certain there are much better ones that could be designed. But the point of all this, as I mentioned before, is to add more layers of strategy, combos, and complexity so that there is more variety in what's possible. This also helps in balancing the individual characters, because if one of these talents proves to be too powerful, then that one specific talent can be nerfed without causing a major weakness for the character. This also helps with some characters that are being very hard countered by other characters as well. If you have talents, for example, that makes you a little bit more resistant to, let's say, what Sombra does or whatever, then perhaps Hammond or Doomfist may not be completely shut down by an enemy Sombra, right? They might have at least a little bit. They'll still be soft countered, but they won't be fully, completely shut down like they were before. I mean, there's lots of different options that you could have. So the next question is, well, how do you activate these talents, and can you change them during the match? This one's a little bit tougher. I think for a starter, you could activate whatever talent you want to have and use for the hero in whatever sort of hero gallery type menu, right? Like when you go to the main menu, there would be a talent screen, and you go there and you can set the talent for all the different characters that you want. But what about during the match? So I think at the start of the match, you should probably be able to change the talents, similar to how you can change the character skin for whatever you want. But after that, it gets a little tricky, because is it such a good idea to allow the player to change talents during the match? Well, it might actually be, but what if you need to change characters? Since the game already started, you are going to be locked into whatever talent you had selected previously for that hero. For example, if you start as Pharah, you can pick whatever character skin you want to use at the very beginning of the match. But if you switch to McCree later on, you don't get to pick the skin. It's just locked into whatever you had it previously. Now, at the very start of the match, if you had planned ahead, yeah, you could have changed the McCree skin as well, but are you going to know that you need to switch to McCree? Are you going to go ahead and switch the talents on every single character that you could possibly play for that match at the very, very start of the match with that limited amount of time? I don't think that's really a good idea. For character skins, it doesn't really matter, because it's just kind of whatever, but with talents, that would be way more important. So what you could have instead is a system where you are allowed to switch talents during the match, but in order to switch those talents, you would need to either be waiting to respawn or in the respawn room itself. Basically, anytime you're able to access that hero switch menu, you would be able to change the talents there. But perhaps it might require a cost to it. Just like how switching characters makes you lose your ultimate charge entirely, perhaps switching your talent in the spawn room would also give some sort of ultimate penalty as well. Now, maybe it doesn't need to be a complete wipe of your ultimate charge like switching characters is, because you're still staying on the same character, you're just switching out the talent. So maybe it doesn't remove 100% of your ult charge, maybe it just removes up to 50% of the ult charge, or something like that, right? So that way, you can adjust to the game that is currently going on and modify your characters as needed, but it requires a little bit more of a decision-making process to do it because there is a cost to it. You can't just keep switching back and forth. It's not some frivolous thing that you can do whenever. Another possibility would be to limit the talent switching to when rounds are starting during a match. Again, this would be very similar to how the character skins work. If you start on defense, then you can pick whatever character skin you want, and then when the round ends and you are on the attacking side, then you can change that skin for that character to whatever you want for that round, and you can keep changing it every single time a round starts. And they could do the same thing with talents. They could make it so that you pick the talents that you want and you're locked in for that particular round, but then in the next round, if you found that, oh hey, you know what, that particular strategy isn't working so well, so let me switch it to something else. They could do that also. So I think ultimately the best way to handle it, however, would probably be either the round switching thing or allowing it to switch during the match when you have access to the hero select menu. But if you do have that, then it would absolutely need to have some kind of a penalty so that you can't just keep switching it as often as you want. And again, I don't think you should lose the whole ult charge, but at least some percentage of it. And I think overall, if you allow the players to switch their talents, you know, after they get taken out, after they're eliminated and they go back to the respawn room, then you're going to allow a lot more flexibility in playstyles. Players are going to be able to adapt to the situation at hand much better than they could before. And at the same time, because there's a cost to it, it's not going to be something that they just do kind of like whenever, right? Like they're not just going to keep switching it back and forth because they feel like it. It's going to be an actual decision that they have to make. I think talents, if implemented in one of those ways, could open up a massive amount of new possibilities with combos and strategies. I think it would make it far more difficult for any one particular team comp to just completely control what the meta is and to be so much stronger than all the rest. Again, I need to emphasize that these talents would not be flat upgrades, but instead they would be side grades that simply offer a variety of options to the player that they could choose to use given whatever particular situation they have at the moment. And another thing that gets brought up quite a bit that I do want to quickly address is that Blizzard doesn't want to make the game too complicated because then it's going to be difficult for people to understand and this and that and blah blah blah. I really don't buy that as an excuse because, let's be honest here, if a kid can memorize 700 different Pokemon, then I don't think it's all that difficult for players in Overwatch to learn some talents. So what do you guys think about adding a talent system to Overwatch, specifically for PvP? And do you think they should be able to change only at the beginning of the match or during rounds, or should they be able to switch while the match is going on? Let me know down below. And also, once more, remember to support your independent YouTubers. Remember to like and share the video. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller because it's never your fault.